The first thing I learned about Montana was that distance could lie to you. On the map, Mercer Ridge Ranch sat 23 miles outside a town called Bellwether. On the road, it felt like I had driven past the edge of every reasonable decision I had made in the last month. My phone lost service 10 minutes after the gas station. The pavement became gravel, the gravel became dirt, and the dirt turned to mud when the sky opened without warning. By the time my car coughed twice and died beside a leaning fence post, I had 1 bar of battery, no signal, and enough rainwater in my shoes to make each step sound like an apology. 3 weeks earlier, I had been sitting in a glass conference room in Chicago while a vice president named Diane explained that the company was restructuring around future needs. I had designed their last 3 national campaigns, trained 2 junior teams, and spent 7 years pretending free pizza counted as professional appreciation. None of that mattered once the finance department found a cheaper version of me. My lease ended in August. My savings could cover 2 months if I stopped eating anything that required refrigeration. Then my college friend Ben called and said a rancher he knew needed summer help. Room, board, and actual pay. I said yes before asking what ranch work involved. The rain had softened by the time headlights appeared behind me. A dark pickup rolled to a stop, and the man behind the wheel leaned across to push open the passenger door. He was broad through the shoulders, with a weathered brown jacket, short dark hair, and the kind of face that looked more comfortable under open sky than inside any room. He studied me, then my suitcase, then my mud-covered loafers. Evan Miller? That depends. Are you here to rescue Evan Miller, or tell him he's trespassing? Cole Mercer. His voice was low and even. No smile. No wasted syllables. I climbed in and tried not to drip on the seat. Good news. I'm definitely Evan. Cole looked through the windshield at my stranded car. You always travel with your whole apartment? It's 1 suitcase. It has wheels. That's generally considered a feature. He put the truck in gear and told me the road got worse past there. I watched the muddy track disappear beneath us. You could have led with that in the job description. I wrote that the ranch was remote. Remote and accessible only by livestock are different categories. The corner of his mouth moved, but not enough for me to call it a smile. Mercer Ridge appeared gradually through the rain. Fencing, dark cattle scattered across pale grass, a red barn with a silver roof, and a low wooden house beneath a line of cottonwoods. It was beautiful in an inconvenient way. Nothing matched. Nothing looked polished. Everything looked used for exactly what it had been built to do. Cole parked beside the house and reached for my suitcase before I could stop him. I can carry it. I know. He carried it anyway. Inside, the house smelled like cedar, coffee, and something warm that had been cooked hours earlier. A pair of work boots sat by the door. 1 coat hung from a hook. 1 plate rested upside down beside the sink. The place did not look lonely so much as carefully arranged for a single person who had stopped expecting anyone else. Cole showed me the kitchen, the bathroom, and the back door that stuck when the weather changed. Then he walked me across the yard toward a smaller cabin near the barn. A blue tarp covered half the roof. 1 window had been boarded shut, and rainwater dripped steadily through the frame. That's the bunkhouse, he said. That was the bunkhouse. Storm tore off part of the roof Tuesday. I thought I'd have it sealed before you got here. I looked through the doorway at the wet mattress and the bucket catching water from the ceiling. I'm flexible, but I draw the line at indoor weather. I figured. Back in the main house, Cole pulled a folded blanket from a cabinet and placed it on the living room sofa. The sofa was narrow, old, and shorter than he was by at least a foot. When he pressed 1 hand against the cushion, a spring made a sound like a small animal being injured. I'll take this, he said. You can use the bedroom until the roof's fixed. I stared at him. You're going to sleep on that? I've slept in worse places. That is not a recommendation. It's my house. Exactly. Which makes it strange that your solution is to exile yourself from the only functional mattress. His jaw shifted. I was beginning to understand that this was how Cole expressed annoyance without spending words on it. There's 1 bed, he said. I assumed the room wasn't hiding a second one. 1 bed, he repeated, slower this time. I glanced down the hallway and then back at him. The realization should have embarrassed me more than it did. Maybe losing my job had burned through the part of me that still cared about appearing sensible. Maybe I was simply too tired to watch a grown man fold himself onto a broken sofa because we were both avoiding an obvious solution. "It's a bed, Mercer. We're both adults." His eyes held mine for a beat longer than necessary. They were brown, but not plain brown. There was amber in them when the light caught, warm against the controlled stillness of his face. "You don't know me," Cole said. "I know you picked me up in the rain, carried my suitcase after I told you not to, and planned to sleep on furniture designed for someone under 5 feet tall. I'm willing to gamble that you're not dangerous. That how you make most decisions?" "Lately, apparently." Cole looked toward the rain-streaked window and said, "Work started at 5. "Is that a threat?" "It's the schedule," he finally agreed, but only after establishing rules with the seriousness of a treaty negotiation. I would stay on the left side. He would stay on the right. We would use separate blankets. Nobody would steal pillows. Nobody would talk after the light went off. I asked whether I needed to sign anything. He told me dinner was at 7. By then, I had changed into dry jeans and the only pair of boots I owned, which Cole examined the way a doctor might examine an avoidable injury. Dinner was beef stew, thick bread, and silence interrupted by my questions about cattle, fencing, and whether every animal on the property secretly wanted to kill me. Cole answered each one without making me feel stupid, though he did say, "The bull won't do it secretly." Rated, weigh, 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 weigh. When I offered to wash the dishes, he handed me a towel instead and washed while I dried. It was such a small domestic arrangement that I almost laughed. That morning, I had been a laid-off designer with nowhere to live after August. By evening, I was standing beside a cowboy in Montana, arguing about where he kept his clean bowls. The bedroom was simpler than the rest of the house. A wooden dresser, a lamp with a yellow shade, a framed photograph of Cole beside an older man in front of the barn. The bed was wide enough for 2 people if both people were committed to denial. Cole changed in the bathroom and returned in a gray t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair damp from the shower. Without the jacket and work shirt, he looked less like the owner of the ranch and more like a man who had spent years carrying things without asking for help. I took the left side, he took the right. We arranged our blankets between us like borders, and Cole switched off the lamp. The rain tapped against the window, softer now. For several minutes, neither of us moved. I could feel the careful control in the way he held himself near the edge of the mattress. There was nearly a foot of empty space between us, but the bed tilted slightly under his weight, enough that I remained aware of him in the dark. His breathing stayed too measured for sleep. I should have been thinking about the work waiting at 5 in the morning, whether my car could be repaired, or whether I had made another temporary decision, because temporary things were easier to survive. Instead, I wondered why Cole Mercer was working so hard not to take up space in his own bed. "Do you always sleep this far off the edge?" I asked. There was a pause. "I thought we weren't talking after the light went off, so you do remember all your rules." Another pause, longer this time. "Only when someone gives me a reason to be careful," he said. I stared into the dark, suddenly unsure whether he meant the distance between us or something neither of us had said yet. At 4:58 the next morning, I learned that Cole did not believe in alarm clocks because apparently his internal organs had been trained by cattle. He sat up in one smooth movement, reached for the lamp, and said, "You've got 2 minutes." I opened one eye. "Until what?" "Work." I thought 5 was when civilized people began considering coffee. "Coffee's already made." That got me moving. I pulled on yesterday's jeans and followed him into a kitchen washed in blue-gray dawn. On the table sat 2 steaming mugs. Mine was blue enamel with a white rim, old enough to have survived at least one war. "That one's yours," Cole said. "Why?" "Only one without a chip." I took a sip and nearly coughed. "Do you drink it like this on purpose?" "Like what?" "Like you're punishing water." He looked at me over his mug. "Sugar's in the jar." By 5:15, I understood why ranchers went to bed early. The air outside was cold enough to make my damp hair feel like a mistake, and the sky had only begun to pale above the mountains. Cole handed me work gloves, pointed toward a line of feed buckets, and explained the morning routine as if I knew the difference between a heifer and a steer. I did not. My first bucket tipped before I made it 10 feet. A young cow shoved her nose against my shoulder, and I landed in the dirt while Cole watched from the gate. He did not laugh. That made it worse. You can laugh, I told him. I'm deciding if you're hurt. My dignity may never recover. He offered a hand. That wasn't one of the things I hired. Cole never treated me like I was fragile. But he also did not let me get far enough into trouble to be unsafe. He showed me how to move behind the cattle without startling them, check a water trough, and close a gate before the animals noticed it was open. When I wrapped a rope around my palm the wrong way, he caught my wrist before I pulled it tight. Never do that. His voice sharpened enough to stop me. He unwound the rope and repositioned my fingers, his calloused hand warm over mine. If the animal runs, it takes your hand with it. Useful information to include before handing me the rope. I thought you'd let go. I've been told that's one of my talents. His eyes lifted to mine, and the joke felt less harmless than I intended. By breakfast, my back ached. My boots had collected enough mud to qualify as property, and I had developed a personal dislike for a red calf that tested every gate I closed. Cole cooked eggs and bacon while I sat at the table pretending not to study the controlled way he moved around the kitchen. He never hurried. He simply arrived at the right place before anything needed him. When he slid a plate in front of me, the blue mug sat beside it again. You kept it alive, he said. The mug, or me, both so far. I added 2 spoonfuls of sugar while he watched with quiet disapproval. Some of us weren't raised on boiled gravel. He sat across from me. Some of us learned not to insult the person cooking breakfast. The next job involved replacing fence near the north pasture. Cole drove metal posts while I carried wire and tried not to look impressed every time he swung the driver. He worked with the efficient strength of someone who had repeated the same motions for years. Sleeves pushed to his elbows. Forearms streaked with dust. I told myself I was studying technique. Then I walked directly into the loose wire. It scraped the heel of my hand. The cut was shallow, but blood appeared quickly. Cole dropped the tool before I finished saying I was fine. He took my wrist and led me back to the truck. Jaw set as if the fence had insulted him personally. The first aid kit lived behind the passenger seat. Cole poured water over the cut, cleaned it, and pressed gauze against my palm. It's barely anything, I said. That's why we take care of it before it becomes something. You always this dramatic about scratches? You always this determined to make them worse? He taped the gauze with more attention than the injury required. His thumb rested briefly against the inside of my wrist, where my pulse had become annoyingly obvious. When he released me, the absence of his hand felt immediate. You can still work, he said. How generous. You're welcome. That afternoon, Cole brought me into the small office at the back of the house to show me the ranch records. The room looked as though paper had been accumulating there since the invention of livestock. Invoices sat in uneven stacks. A desktop computer hummed beside a printer, old enough to resent electricity. When Cole opened the ranch website, I stared at a page featuring a stretched photograph of a cow and bright red lettering that read "Quality beef since 1987. Did you make this? I asked. My cousin did. Does your cousin hate you? Cole leaned against the desk. It works. It looks like the internet is holding your cattle hostage. I showed him broken links, a missing mobile order form, and photographs that made the ranch look abandoned. Cole folded his arms and listened. I could rebuild this, I said. You hired me for fences. You hired me because Ben said I needed work. I know how to do work that doesn't require tetanus shots. I can't pay Chicago design rates. Good thing we're not in Chicago. He studied me. What would you want? Most people told me what they could offer and waited to see if I was desperate enough. Cole waited for an answer. A fair hourly rate, I said, and permission to delete the red letters. The red letters stay. Then double the rate. We settled on a number somewhere between fair and stubborn. That evening, while Cole checked the herd, I photographed the barn in the late light. He returned to find me crouched beside the fence, trying to capture the mountains behind the cattle. You're lying in manure, he said. It's dirt. It was dirt this morning. I stood too quickly and slipped. Cole caught me by the waist, steadying me against his chest. For one suspended second, neither of us moved. I could feel the solid line of him through our shirts and smell sun, leather, and clean sweat. His hand tightened once at my side before he let go. Watch where you step, I was distracted by your landscaping. Dinner was leftover stew, eaten on the porch while evening stretched gold across the fields. Cole asked what Chicago was like. I told him about the trains, winter wind between buildings, and the coffee shop beneath my old apartment where the barista knew my order but not my name. He said the ranch had belonged to his grandfather, then his father, and now him. When I asked whether he had ever wanted to leave, he looked toward the pasture. Everybody wants to leave at some point. Did you? At some point. He did not explain. I lifted the blue mug. Your coffee improved. You added enough sugar to make it pie, and yet you remembered to put the jar beside my seat. The bunkhouse roof could not be repaired that week. The wood beneath the damaged section had swollen, and Cole's contractor was working 2 counties away. Cole delivered the news while we washed dishes, his back to me. Could be 10 days. I'll try to endure the mattress. You don't have to. We covered this. The couch isn't that bad. From the living room came another wounded metallic squeak. I handed him a dry plate. Mercer. I've slept next to men with worse personalities and less concern for my spine. We'll survive. His hand stopped briefly beneath mine on the plate. 10 days, he said. That's all. The certainty sounded less like reassurance than a reminder. That night, neither of us followed the rules as carefully. Cole read with the lamp on, an old paperback held against one bent knee. I answered emails until the signal failed. When the light went out, we talked anyway about the red calf, the website, and whether my boots could be saved. At some point, I fell asleep facing him. I woke before dawn with warmth along my back and the blanket twisted around my legs. I had crossed the invisible border. Cole lay close enough that his breath touched the back of my neck. One hand rested on the blanket, inches from my waist. I stayed still, deciding how to move without making the moment real. Cole's breathing changed. He was awake. His fingers flexed once, but did not immediately pull away. I stole your side, I whispered. You stole the blanket first. That sounds like victim blaming. His hand finally lifted, slow and careful, leaving cold air where the warmth had been. He moved toward the edge again. Outside, a gate clanged in the wind. Cole sat up and reached for his clothes. Roof won't be fixed soon, he said, not looking at me. Looks like you're stuck here a while longer. I should have heard inconvenience. Instead, I heard the smallest trace of relief. By the end of my first week at Mercer Ridge, I could open the north gate without letting the red calf escape, stack feed bags without dropping one on my foot, and identify trouble by the way Cole said my name. A flat Evan meant I had misunderstood instructions. A sharper one meant I was standing somewhere dangerous. The quiet version, the one he used when he found me rebuilding the ranch website after midnight, meant he was worried but would not admit it. He leaned against the office doorway with his arms folded. You planning to sleep? Eventually. Morning still starts at 5. Your website tells customers to fax an order form. This is an emergency. The new site took shape faster than I expected. I replaced the blurred cattle photographs, simplified the order page, and wrote descriptions that sounded like a real person had raised the animals instead of a committee selling equipment. Cole resisted every sentence that mentioned him. He approved photographs of fields, barns, horses, and even the red calf. But the picture I took of him repairing a fence stayed in the rejected folder. People should know who runs the place, I said. They're buying beef, not my biography. You're standing in good light, with your sleeves rolled up. That is practically a business asset. He gave me a look. Delete it. I moved it into a folder labeled Definitely Deleted. The blue enamel mug became mine without either of us discussing it. On the second morning, Cole placed the sugar jar beside it. On the third, there was a carton of milk in the refrigerator, even though he drank his coffee black. By Friday, the coffee waiting on the porch already contained 2 spoonfuls of sugar and enough milk to soften the color. You're learning, I told him. I'm preventing complaints. That's how all great romances begin. He nearly spilled his coffee. I pretended not to notice and watched the light move across the grass. The mug always sat on the same porch rail, beside Cole's plain black one, as though the house had quietly made room for a second habit. The website brought in 4 orders during its first 2 days. One came from a restaurant in Bozeman that Cole had been trying to reach for months. He read the email twice, then handed me his phone as if he needed confirmation that the words had not changed. "They want to call Monday," I said. "I can read. You're staring at it like it proposed marriage." They never answered before. "Your old website looked contagious." He shook his head, but I saw the relief beneath it. That afternoon, he asked me to sit beside him while he worked through delivery costs. It was the first time he said, "What do you think?" before I offered an opinion. By dinner, my notes covered half his desk, and he had stopped moving them aside. Ruth Mercer's diner sat on the corner of Bellwether's Main Street beneath a faded sign promising hot pie and honest coffee. Ruth took one look at me, then at Cole behind my shoulder, and said, "So, you're the reason he bought milk." So, Ruth. Cole closed his eyes briefly. I liked her immediately. She was small, silver-haired, and moved behind the counter with the speed of someone who refused to let anyone wait. She gave me pie before I ordered and asked whether Cole was feeding me properly. "He makes coffee like a personal challenge," I said, "yet you're still drinking it." "I've adapted." Ruth glanced at the blue mug I had carried from the truck. Apparently, Cole went to help unload produce, leaving Ruth and me alone. She wiped an already clean spot and said he had not let anyone stay in the house since his father died. "I'm not exactly staying," I told her. "The bunkhouse roof is broken. Roof's been leaking for 3 summers. I looked through the window, where Cole was lifting wooden crates from a van. He said the storm tore it open. Storm made it worse. Ruth's expression softened. "Cole's good at fixing what he can touch. The rest takes longer." When he returned, he looked between us with immediate suspicion. "What did she tell you? That your coffee is a regional crime?" Ruth smiled. "Among other things." 2 mornings later, a calf stopped eating. Cole noticed from halfway across the pasture and called Mason Hale, the local veterinarian. Mason arrived in a clean truck and an unreasonably clean shirt, wearing an easy smile that made him look cast to play a rural doctor. He shook my hand, asked how city life had failed me, and laughed when I said Montana had weaponized its livestock. Cole did not laugh. He stood beside the calf with one hand on its neck, answering Mason's questions in clipped sentences. When Mason asked me to hold his medical bag, Cole took it before I could reach. The examination lasted nearly an hour. Mason explained what he was doing, and I asked enough questions that he invited me to a summer street fair. There's music, food, and a pie contest. Ruth pretends not to care about winning, he said. "You should come." "He's working," Cole said. Mason looked at him. "At 9 on a Saturday night? Depends what needs doing." I turned toward Cole. "Do the cattle observe weekends?" No. Very strong work ethic." Mason grinned and said he would text the details. Cole's expression did not change, but he checked the calf's water twice after Mason left. That evening, Mason returned for a thermometer. Cole was in the barn, so I invited him onto the porch and poured coffee. I reached for the nearest mug. The moment Cole came around the corner, his gaze landed on the blue enamel cup in Mason's hand. He stopped. "That one's Evan's," he said. Mason looked at the mug, then at me. "Didn't know the cups had assigned seating." "They don't," I said too quickly. Cole took the cup, emptied it, washed it, and set it beside my place on the rail. Then he handed Mason another mug without a word. Mason hid a smile badly. I waited until his truck disappeared. "You know, I can share a cup." He had his own. "You always confiscate beverages from people you like? It was your mug." "You keep saying that like I signed adoption papers." He tightened a bolt on a gate until the metal squeaked. "You use it every morning." "So?" "So I put it there for you." The answer landed with more weight than the object deserved. Cole looked away first. "Hand me the smaller wrench." I gave it to him without another joke. For the rest of the afternoon, I felt that sentence following me through every task. The calf worsened after dark. Cole and I took turns keeping it warm while waiting for Mason's medication to work. Around midnight, I sat in the straw with its head against my thigh and talked about Chicago traffic, because it seemed as useful as prayer. Cole returned with blankets and stopped in the doorway. "You can go inside. I'm fine. You've been up since 5. So have you." He crouched beside me and checked the calf's breathing. Our shoulders touched. "Most people would have quit by now," he said. "The job or the cow?" "Both." I looked at him. "You thought I would. I didn't know you." "You do now." His eyes stayed on mine. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I do." Near dawn, The calf stood. Cole released a breath that sounded as if he had held it all night. Back at the house, the blue mug waited beside the sink, clean and warm from the water. We carried our coffee to the porch without speaking. When I sat, exhaustion pulled my shoulder against his. Cole did not move away. After a minute, he shifted enough to support more of my weight. The sun rose behind the barn, touching wet grass with gold. Nothing about it was dramatic. That was what frightened me. I had begun to recognize the exact shape of peace, and it looked like Cole's shoulder beneath my cheek. That night, the light had been off for 20 minutes when Cole asked what I would do after summer. I told him I did not know. Maybe Chicago. Maybe another agency. Maybe wherever someone offered enough money to make the decision for me. "You always let work choose where you live?" he asked. "It's easier than pretending a place wants me." The mattress shifted as he turned toward me. I could not see his face, only the darker outline of him. "Do you want me to stay until the end of summer?" I asked. Silence stretched between us. Warm and dangerous. Then Cole said, "I'm starting to think the summer's the problem." He did not explain. I did not ask him to. Saturday arrived hot enough to make the road shimmer. By late afternoon, Ruth had called twice to remind Cole that people were allowed to leave their property for reasons other than buying feed. Mason had texted me the address of the street fair, followed by a promise of beer cold enough to justify country music. Cole read neither message, but he noticed every time my phone lit up. "You going?" he asked while tightening a saddle strap. I was considering it. "Mason'll be there. That's usually how invitations work." He pulled the strap harder than necessary. "Truck leaves for town at 6. I looked at him. "Are you going?" "Ruth needs help moving tables. So this has nothing to do with making sure I don't get lost with the dangerously friendly veterinarian?" Cole's expression stayed calm, but a pulse shifted in his jaw. "Bellwether has 3 streets. Then I'm probably safe." He walked the horse toward the barn without answering. I watched him go, pleased with myself for 5 seconds, before wondering why I cared whether he was jealous. The answer stood too close to everything I had been refusing to name. The summer fair occupied 2 blocks of Main Street. Strings of bulbs hung between storefronts. A local band played beneath a canvas canopy, and Ruth guarded 6 pies as if she expected sabotage. Cole disappeared to carry tables and fix a loose electrical cord. Mason found me beside the lemonade stand and handed me a beer. He wore jeans, a pale shirt with rolled sleeves, and the easy confidence of a man who never wondered whether he belonged. "You clean up well for someone living with cattle," he said. "The cattle asked me to make an effort." Mason introduced me to people whose names I forgot and persuaded me to play a game involving rings and glass bottles. When I won a stuffed horse, he held it against my shoulder and declared a family resemblance. I laughed, then looked across the street without meaning to. Cole stood beside Ruth's diner carrying a folded table. His attention was fixed on us with such stillness that the crowd seemed to move around him. When our eyes met, he looked away first. "You know," Mason said, "I asked you here because you seemed like you needed a night off, not because I'm trying to start a range war." "Crimes," Ingwode. "There is no war. Tell that to the man watching me like I vaccinated his truck." I took a drink. Cole doesn't care who I spend time with. Mason glanced over my shoulder. "Sure, he doesn't. Then he's naturally territorial about enamel mugs, Saturday schedules, and how close other men stand to you." I opened my mouth, but Mason lifted a hand. "Relax, I'm not competing. Cole's my friend. He's also capable of starving beside a full refrigerator, because nobody told him he was allowed to open it." The band shifted into something slower as dusk settled. Mason offered his hand with exaggerated formality. "One dance. Strictly to improve the rancher's blood pressure. That sounds medically irresponsible. I'm off duty." I let him pull me toward the stage. We had barely found the rhythm when someone touched my elbow. Cole stood there, hat pushed back, expression unreadable. "Storm's coming," he said. Clouds had gathered over the mountains. Mason looked upward. Rain's at least 40 minutes out. Cole's gaze moved to his hand at my waist. "Road floods early." I thanked Mason and followed Cole to the truck. Neither of us spoke until Bellwether's lights disappeared. The first drops struck the windshield 10 minutes later. Cole drove with both hands on the wheel. "You didn't have to leave," he said. "You announced an evacuation. You could have stayed with Mason. And gotten home how? He owns a truck. So do you." Cole's hands tightened. "You looked like you were having a good time." I was. Good. The word was too flat. I turned toward him. You asked if Mason was my type. No, I didn't. You've been asking without using the sentence. Rain blurred the road ahead. He's easy to like, Cole said. Is that your official veterinary assessment? He's smart, friendly, lives in town, has his own mug. Cole shot me a look. You noticed. It was subtle, if you've never observed human behavior. Lightning flashed over the fields. Is he? Cole asked. Is he what? Your type. The question came so quietly I almost missed it beneath the rain. I studied his profile, the rigid line of his shoulders. I thought you didn't care who I liked. Cole swallowed. I didn't say that. The truck hit standing water and pulled right. He corrected, then slowed. A fallen branch blocked half the road. There's an equipment shed close by, he said. We'll wait until this passes. The shed stood at the edge of an unused hayfield, metal roofed and open on one side. We ran from the truck through rain that soaked us before we crossed 20 feet. Inside, the air smelled of dust and dry grass. Thunder rolled through the beams. Cole pulled off his hat. His shirt clung to his chest and shoulders. I pushed wet hair from my forehead. So, I said, because silence had become more dangerous than the storm. What is my type? Quote, Cole leaned against a post. How would I know? You've apparently been conducting research. He looked at me, and the restraint he had carried for weeks seemed suddenly thin. Men who talk more than they need to. That rules you out. Men who know what they're doing. Sometimes, men who can give you something beyond this place. The last sentence changed the air. I stepped closer. You keep deciding what this place is to me. It's a summer job. That isn't what I asked. You didn't ask anything. Fine. Why did you care that Mason had his hand on me? Cole's eyes dropped briefly to my mouth. Evan. There it is. The version of my name that means I'm standing somewhere dangerous. You are. Because of the storm? No. Rain hammered the roof. We stood close enough that I could feel heat coming from him despite our wet clothes. Cole lifted one hand as if to touch my face, then stopped inches from my cheek. I could have closed the distance. More than that, I wanted him to choose it without being cornered into the truth. Tell me to move, I said. His knuckles grazed the wet hair near my temple. I should. That isn't the same thing. His breathing changed. For 1 second, I believed he would kiss me. Then Cole lowered his hand and stepped back. You work for me. The words landed harder than rejection because they were reasonable. I nodded and looked out at the rain. Right. Cole said my name. But I walked to the truck before he could finish. We waited in silence, then drove home after the worst passed. The cab smelled like wet denim and everything we had almost done. We went to bed without coffee or conversation. Cole faced the wall. I stared at the ceiling while thunder moved farther across the valley. When I finally slept, I dreamed of cardboard boxes beside a door. My father telling me not to unpack because we would not be staying long. I woke disoriented, breathing too fast, one hand gripping the sheet. Cole turned immediately. Evan? I'm fine. You're not. His voice was rough with sleep. He reached across the space and closed his hand around my wrist. His thumb rested over my pulse, steady and warm. He did not ask what I had dreamed. He only said, You're here. The room returned slowly. Darkness beyond the window, rain ticking from the roof. Cole beside me. For now, I whispered. His grip tightened. Silence followed, too long and too full. I expected him to let go. Instead, he moved closer and drew my hand toward the center of the bed. My forehead touched his chest. One arm settled around my shoulders with careful pressure, as though he was holding something that might leave if frightened. I should have reminded him that I worked for him. I should have returned to my side. Instead, I listened to his heartbeat until mine matched it. Morning entered quietly. I woke with my cheek against Cole's shirt, one leg tangled with his beneath the blankets, his arm firm around my waist. His face was inches from mine. For once, he was not already awake. Then his eyes opened. Neither of us moved. Cole's gaze dropped to my lips. His hand spread against my back. He leaned closer, slow enough to stop, close enough that the next breath belonged to both of us. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. We pulled apart as if the sound had broken glass. The screen lit with Tessa's name and a message beneath it. Chicago wants to interview you Monday. Cole saw it. Whatever had been open in his face closed before I could reach for him. For the rest of Sunday, he behaved as if the message had changed the terms of the entire summer. He did not mention the almost kiss. He did not mention the way I had fallen asleep against him or how his hand had remained at my waist until the phone vibrated. He only asked whether Monday's interview was at 9 or 10 and whether my laptop camera still worked. 10, I said. And yes, he nodded once. Signal's better in the office. Then he went outside and found 3 jobs that had not existed the day before. I told myself he was giving me space. By noon, it felt more like distance being built deliberately. Cole ate lunch standing at the counter. He asked about the website in the same tone he used to ask whether the Southern Trough was full. When our hands touched over a stack of invoices, he pulled his back first. That night, he waited until I was already in bed before entering the room. He lay so close to the edge that the mattress barely shifted beneath him. I stared into the darkness and wondered how 2 people could share one bed and still make an entire state fit between them. The interview went well. That was the problem. Tessa had referred me to a small agency run by people I respected. The creative director remembered one of my campaigns. They offered remote flexibility at first, then mentioned that the position would become office-based by fall. The salary was less than I used to make, but more than enough to rebuild my savings. When the call ended, Cole stood in the doorway with 2 mugs. He handed me the blue one. How'd it go? They want a second interview. That's good. He said it too quickly. Is it? Why wouldn't it be? I looked down at the coffee. He had added the right amount of milk. No reason. 2 days later, a truck from Bellwether Auto came up the drive carrying my car. I walked outside while the driver lowered it from the trailer. The engine started on the first turn. New alternator, the mechanic said. Battery was nearly done too, so we replaced that. I stared at the invoice. Half the total had already been paid. By who? The mechanic glanced toward the barn. Mercer said you needed it ready. Cole emerged carrying a coil of rope. You weren't supposed to bring it until Friday. Finished early. The mechanic handed me the keys and left before I could stop him. You paid for my car? I asked. Part of it. I didn't ask you to. You need a way back. The sentence sat between us. Back where? Cole looked toward the pasture instead of at me. Chicago. If they call. Che. I held the keys so tightly the metal pressed into my palm. You've already decided I'm going? I decided you shouldn't miss an opportunity because your car broke down. That is not what I asked. He said nothing. I laughed once, without humor. You are remarkably good at answering every question except the one I'm actually asking. Cole's eyes hardened. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me why you're acting like the last 2 weeks didn't happen. You got a job offer. I got an interview. You'll get the offer. You sound very confident. I've seen your work. There it was again. Praise delivered like a door being held open. I stepped closer. Did you send them my portfolio? His silence answered first. Tessa asked for the updated files, he said. I had them. You sent my work to Chicago without asking me? You were asleep. The deadline was that morning. And then you paid to fix my car. So you'd have a choice. No. So I could leave. Cole set the rope down. Those are not the same thing. They feel exactly the same from where I'm standing. His expression shifted, but he still did not move toward me. You came here because you needed money and a place to stay. That was the agreement. I know what the agreement was. The summer ends. You keep saying that like the calendar made the decision for us. What decision? I stared at him. The question was either cruel or frightened, and I could not tell which. Forget it. I turned toward the house, but he caught my arm. Not hard. Just enough to stop me. Evan. I looked down at his hand until he released me. You fixed everything so I could leave. I fixed it so you wouldn't have to stay because you were stuck. Did it ever occur to you that I might have stayed because I wanted to? Cole's face went still. The pause lasted only a second. Maybe 2. It was long enough. I nodded. Right. That's not what I meant. You didn't say anything. I'm trying not to make this harder. For who? He dragged a hand over his face. You have a life in Chicago. I had a lease and a job that disappeared in a conference room. That isn't the same as a life. You have talent. People there know what to do with it. And you don't? That's not what I said. No, Cole. You almost never say what you mean. You just build fences around it and wait for everyone else to respect the property line. His jaw tightened. This ranch is hard. It's isolated. It doesn't stop because someone's tired or wants a weekend. I'm not asking you to trade your future for this. I didn't ask you to choose my future. I'm giving you a way out. I never asked for one. The hurt in his eyes appeared and vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. Everyone wants one eventually. The words were not about me, but they struck the oldest part of me anyway. I heard my father telling me not to unpack. I heard my former boyfriend saying I always kept one foot outside the door. I had spent years leaving first because departure hurt less when I controlled it. Now Cole had prepared the road before I had even chosen a direction. When were you going to tell me? I asked. When it was done. Of course. I walked into the house and closed the door behind me. This time, he did not follow. Ruth found me in the kitchen an hour later, putting clothes into my suitcase. She had come to deliver pie, but one look at the bed told her the rest. He's an idiot, she said. He's efficient. That too. I folded a shirt harder than necessary. He paid for my car, sent my portfolio, and arranged everything so I could be gone by the weekend. Ruth placed the pie on the dresser. Cole thinks loving people means making sure they never have to sacrifice for him. He doesn't love me. Her gaze settled on my face. Did he say that? He didn't have to. That man has built half his life out of things he didn't say. Don't mistake silence for clarity. Quote, I zipped the suitcase. I asked if he wanted me to stay. And he told me Chicago was good for my career. Ruth Sihil. Then he's a bigger idiot than I thought. I left the next morning before sunrise. Cole stood beside the truck while I loaded my suitcase into my car. He looked as though he had not slept. Neither had I. The blue mug sat on the porch rail, steam rising into the cold air. For one reckless moment, I waited for him to say my name the way he had in the rain. The way that meant danger and concern, and something worth turning back for. Instead, he asked, You have enough gas? Yes. Road's clear. Good. He placed an envelope on the passenger seat. My pay through the end of the week, plus the amount he still owed for the website. Every dollar exact. Nothing that required me to return. I walked back to the porch, picked up the blue mug, and carried it into the kitchen. I washed it carefully, dried it, and placed it on the table. When I returned outside, Cole had not moved. I hope the restaurant contract works out, I said. It will, because of you. I wanted to tell him that was not enough. Instead, I got into my car. Chicago welcomed me with traffic, glass buildings, and the familiar sensation of becoming invisible among people moving with purpose. Tessa let me sleep on her sofa and loaned me a shirt for the second interview. The agency office had bright windows, expensive chairs, and bowls of fruit nobody touched. They spoke about growth, stability, and long-term opportunity. I answered well. I smiled at the right moments. When they asked where I saw myself in 3 years, the only image that came to me was a porch at sunrise and a black coffee mug beside an empty space. They offered me the job before I left. I asked for an hour to think. In the lobby, my phone displayed 3 unread messages from Ruth and none from Cole. The first was a complaint about losing the pie contest. The second said the restaurant had approved the ranch contract. The third was a photograph. The blue enamel mug sat on the porch rail beside Cole's black one. Morning light stretched across the boards. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. There was no message beneath the picture. I stood in the agency lobby staring at it until the screen dimmed. Cole had made the coffee. He had carried it outside. He had left a place for me, even after helping me leave. The image hurt because it was the first honest thing either of us had said since the storm. Cole wanted me there. He simply believed wanting me was selfish. I had spent years mistaking departure for control. And he had spent years mistaking silence for sacrifice. Between us, we had built a perfect road away from the thing we both wanted. The hiring manager called while I was still in the lobby. She said they were excited. The paperwork could be sent that afternoon, and they would need me in the Chicago office by September. I thanked her and asked whether they would consider a 6-month freelance contract instead. There was a pause. She said the role had been designed as permanent. I told her I understood. But I was not ready to build my life around an office again. The words surprised me with how true they sounded. By the time the call ended, I had a smaller offer, fewer guarantees, and a decision that felt like mine. Tessa was waiting outside with 2 coffees and an expression that suggested she had already prepared a speech about financial responsibility. You turned it down, she said. I changed it. That is usually what people claim after turning something down. I showed her the freelance terms. She read them, then looked at Ruth's picture on my phone. This is about the cowboy. It's about me. She lifted an eyebrow. That sounded almost healthy. I laughed, then told her everything I had avoided, saying, the bed, the storm, the way Cole remembered my coffee, the fight, and the silence that followed. Tessa listened. When I finished, she handed me my car keys, then stopped telling the story from 1,000 miles away. I drove west before I could become sensible. Chicago disappeared in the mirror, then Illinois, then the flat roads that gave me too much time to rehearse every possible outcome. Cole might tell me I had misunderstood. He might say the mug meant nothing. He might still believe the ranch was too small for the future I wanted. By the second day, fear had begun arguing that I should call first. By the third, I recognized the old instinct for what it was, the urge to keep one hand on the exit before anyone could close the door. I kept driving. Rain had darkened the road outside Bellwether when I pulled into Ruth's diner. I had survived almost 1,500 miles on gas station food and bad decisions. Ruth stood behind the counter filling sugar jars. She looked through the window at my car and did not appear surprised. "He left an hour ago," she said. "Where?" "Chicago." I stared at her. She set down the jar. "Took your mug, too." When I asked whether he had really driven to Chicago, she said, "He finally figured out that letting someone go is different from wanting them gone." She glanced toward the door. "You'd better catch him before both of you cross the country out of stubbornness." I found Cole 10 miles east of town at the roadside pullout where the highway split toward the interstate. His truck was parked beneath a flickering lamp. He stood beside it with his phone in one hand and the blue enamel mug in the other, as if he had stopped to decide whether he had the courage to call. I pulled in too fast, gravel snapping beneath my tires. Cole turned. For several seconds, neither of us moved. He looked tired, unshaven, and uncertain. His gaze shifted to my packed car. "You came back." I nodded toward the mug. "So did that." He looked down at it. I didn't know what else to bring. I walked toward him until only a few feet remained. When I asked whether he had really been driving to Chicago, he admitted he had made it 10 miles and did not have an address. "You could have called. I was working up to it." From the highway, his mouth almost curved, but the fear stayed in his eyes. "Evan, I was wrong." He said it plainly, without defense. He told me his father had stayed on the ranch for people he loved, then spent his final years talking about every road he had not taken. Cole had been afraid that if he asked me to stay, I would someday look at him with the same regret. "So I made the choice before you could make it," he said. "You don't get to choose what I'll regret." "I know. You don't get to send my work away, fix my car, and build an exit because you're afraid to hear my answer." He said he knew that too. The wind moved damp hair across his forehead. "I don't need another ranch hand," he said. "I don't need someone to finish the summer. I need you there in the morning, talking before I'm awake enough to answer. I need your files all over my desk and your shoes in the wrong place by the door. I need you telling me the website is an emergency and arguing with cattle like they understand sarcasm." His voice roughened. "I wanted you to stay. I was afraid you'd regret choosing the ranch. Or me. So I made leaving easy and pretended that was love." My throat tightened, but I made myself hold his gaze. I told him I did not need a promise that life there would be easy. Cole said it would not be. "I know. I need to know there's a place for me because you want me there, not because the bunkhouse roof is broken, not because you need temporary help. Kinda. Not." He stepped closer. There has been since the first morning." I looked at the mug between us. That was a surprisingly long confession for a man who once banned talking after the lights went out. "I'm reconsidering several rules." "Good." I took the mug from his hand and set it on the truck hood. "There's another one we should discuss." His eyes dropped to my mouth, then returned to mine. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes." He touched my face with the same hand he had stopped inches away from me in the shed. This time he did not pull back. The kiss was careful at first, as though he still expected the moment to be taken from him. I caught the front of his jacket and drew him closer. Whatever restraint remained broke quietly. His other hand settled at my waist, warm and certain, and the miles between us disappeared. When we finally separated, his forehead rested against mine. "You drove all this way without calling," he said. "You were driving in the wrong direction without an address. I would have figured it out." "So would I." We returned to Mercer Ridge after midnight. My suitcase stayed in the car until morning. Not because I planned to leave, but because I was too tired to carry it. Cole unlocked the door, then paused as if the house itself needed to hear him say it. Stay. The word was simple, stripped of every excuse. I stepped inside. Ask me again when I'm less exhausted. His face fell before I added, I want to hear you say it more than once. He closed the door behind us. Stay, Evan. Okay. The bunkhouse was repaired by August. Instead of moving into it, I turned the front room into a studio with a wide desk, better internet, and the photograph of Cole repairing the fence framed above the printer. We rewrote our working arrangement, so I was paid separately for design and business work. Cole insisted on a formal contract. I insisted the red lettering remain permanently deleted. We both learned that partnership required more than wanting the same life. It required asking questions before answering them for each other. By autumn, my clothes had replaced the empty half of Cole's dresser. The suitcase went into the attic. We repaired the old bed frame in the second room, but it collected clean laundry and tax records instead of either of us. The following summer, Ruth gave me a new mug without a chip. Cole thanked her and placed it in the cabinet. The old blue one remained on the porch rail, its white rim worn and one small dent near the handle from the day he carried it east looking for me. He still woke before 5. I still complained. He still made coffee strong enough to remove paint, but he learned to add 2 spoonfuls of sugar and milk to mine without looking. Some mornings we talked on the porch. Some mornings we sat in silence, our shoulders touching while the ranch woke around us. I used to think home was the place you stopped running. Cole taught me it was the place where someone noticed you were gone and left your coffee waiting anyway.